There comes a moment in every life when the world grows too loud, when the voices around you drown out the quiet truth inside your chest. A moment when you look at the path beneath your feet and realize it was shaped more by expectation than by desire, more by pressure than by purpose. And in that moment, somewhere between exhaustion and awakening, you feel a question rise within you. What would happen if I finally chose myself, not in small ways, not halfway, not only when it was convenient or safe, but fully, completely, unapologetically? What would life look like if you stopped bending to fit shapes that hurt you? If you stopped carrying burdens that never belonged to you? If you stopped shrinking just to keep the peace? Most people never answer that question. They stay on the well-worn road. They keep repeating the same roles. They choose familiarity over freedom. But a few, the brave ones, take a step toward the unknown, toward the unmarked trail that leads back to their own soul, and everything changes the moment they do. Today, I want to show you what unfolds when you become that person, when you finally choose yourself above all else. Choosing yourself is never a loud declaration. It begins as a quiet, almost trembling courage that grows inside you long before you can name it. It is the courage of someone standing at the edge of a familiar road, worn flat by the footsteps of everyone who told you who you should be, and realizing for the first time that the trail bending into the trees, the one no one speaks about, the one shadowed, uncertain, and seemingly lonely, is calling your name. This courage doesn't roar, it whispers. It comes to you in those small hours when you are alone with your own thoughts, when the noise of the world has fallen away, and you are left to face the echo of your own longing. You feel it like a pulse beneath your ribs, a reminder that there is a life meant for you, one that you have delayed, postponed, sacrificed, or misplaced in your attempt to belong to everyone but yourself. Choosing yourself above all else begins with recognizing that the familiar road, the one paved with expectations and polished with pleasing others, has never truly felt like home. It has felt safe because it was known, but it has not felt alive. Somewhere within you, a small rebellion forms, a gentle but persistent ache that tells you the life you have lived so far was built too much on compromise and too little on your own truth. You begin questioning why your yes has so often been someone else's comfort, and your no so often a betrayal of your own peace. You begin remembering moments when you silenced your own desires to keep harmony, when you bent so far backward that you almost disappeared. This quiet courage grows with every memory of yourself that you misplaced. It grows when you catch yourself daydreaming about the person you could be if you stopped apologizing for wanting more. It grows when you realize that no one is coming to rescue you from the choices you avoid making. You understand that nobody will magically place you back into the center of your own life. You must walk yourself there. And that realization is the beginning of a shift so deep it feels like the earth turning beneath your feet. At first, choosing yourself feels disloyal. It feels like turning away from the voices that have shaped you, from the roles you were trained to perform. It feels like stepping outside a circle you have always stood in, but with each small act of self-honor, the loneliness of the choice begins to soften, and you recognize that the solitude you feared is not the same as abandonment. It is space, room to breathe, room to think, room to feel who you are without the constant pull of expectation. The quiet courage sharpens here, in this space, where you finally hear the sound of your own life calling you forward. You begin noticing things you overlooked before, the weight of decisions you made out of habit, the heaviness of paths you walked out of obligation, the silence of dreams you stored away because others told you they were impractical or foolish. You realize those dreams never died, they were only waiting for you to choose them. And that courage pushes you to pick up the fragments of yourself that you left scattered along the years. Choosing yourself also requires the bravery to disappoint others for the first time, not out of cruelty but out of necessity. You learn that not every hand reaching for you deserves the energy you have left. You learn that boundaries are not walls but gates you finally have the keys to. You learn that protecting your peace is not selfishness, but self-respect. And the more you learn this, the more that quiet courage becomes a steady flame. There are nights when you will doubt your decision, when the old road will call you back with promises of comfort, familiarity, and approval. There will be moments when you feel the gravity of other people's disappointment tugging at your resolve. But deep within, you will sense a strength rising, slow, steady, patient. You will realize that the fear you feel is only the past trying to reclaim you, and the courage you feel is the future trying to guide you forward. Choosing yourself above all else is not an act of defiance, but an act of returning. Returning to the truth you abandoned. Returning to the voice you buried. Returning to the path that has waited for you all along. It is the quiet bravery of standing alone for a moment, so you can learn to stand fully in your own life. It is the first step toward becoming the person you were always meant to be. The awakening of self-worth does not arrive like a celebration. It unfolds slowly, like dawn moving across a field, touching everything gently before you fully realize the light has changed. It begins the moment you recognize that your value does not come from how tirelessly you serve others, nor from how well you perform in roles that were handed to you, nor from the approval that rises or falls depending on what the world wants from you. It begins when you notice how often you have placed yourself last, not out of humility but out of habit, because you were taught somewhere along the line that your needs were an afterthought, your feelings an inconvenience, and your dreams too fragile to prioritize. Something deep inside finally stirs in resistance to that idea, and that stirring is the first spark of awakening. This awakening often starts quietly, with questions that slip into your mind at unexpected moments. Why do I settle for less than I deserve? Why do I give so much to people who give so little in return? Why do I run after validation that leaves me feeling emptier each time? You begin to see how often you have placed your worth in the hands of people who never learned how to hold it. You notice how often you measured your value by someone else's mood, attention, or affection, as though your self-worth were a fragile object that could be increased or decreased at their will. As these realizations gather strength, you feel something inside you shifting, something that refuses to be defined by the limited opinions others have of you. The awakening of self-worth is not dramatic. It's a return to a truth you always knew but kept ignoring. You start to catch glimpses of your own strength, in the way you've survived storms that once threatened to break you. You recognize the power in your resilience, the quiet dignity in your patience, the beauty in your persistence, and the depth in your compassion. You begin to understand that you are not ordinary simply because people treated you like you were easy to replace. You are rare in ways you had forgotten, and that realization changes how you speak to yourself, how you carry yourself, how you respond to the world. You also begin to notice the patterns of self-betrayal you used to justify, the friendships where you gave endlessly, but received nothing but exhaustion, the relationships where you accepted breadcrumbs and called them meals, the environments where you shrank yourself to fit in or kept silent to keep the peace. With each memory, you feel a quiet rebellion rising. You are no longer willing to pay the price of losing yourself just to be loved, liked, or accepted. You see now that your self-worth cannot exist where you are required to disappear. This awakening makes you more honest with yourself. You stop pretending you are fine when your heart is tired. You stop explaining your value to people determined not to see it. You stop negotiating your boundaries as if they were optional suggestions rather than essential protections. Every time you choose yourself, even in small ways, you reinforce a belief you had forgotten, that you deserve peace, respect, and care, not someday but now. As your self-worth strengthens, you notice how differently you move in the world. You no longer chase after things that once kept you awake at night. You no longer hold your breath hoping someone will choose you. You no longer apologize for wanting space, clarity, or truth. You become comfortable saying no without guilt, yes without hesitation, and goodbye without fear. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation, because you understand that anything that requires you to abandon yourself is too expensive to afford. There is also a deep calm that comes with this awakening. You no longer cling to people or situations out of desperation. You understand that what is meant for you will not require you to shrink. You trust your instincts more. You speak your truth more clearly. You honor your feelings instead of dismissing them. And in doing so, you open the door for healthier relationships, ones built on respect, not sacrifice, mutuality, not imbalance. The awakening of self-worth is not a single moment, but a continuous unfolding. Each day you learn a little more about who you are, what you deserve, and what you will no longer tolerate. Each day you step a little deeper into your own value, and with each step, you realize that choosing yourself was never selfish. It was the beginning of remembering your worth and rising into the fullness of who you were always meant to be. Shedding old expectations is one of the most liberating transformations a person can experience, yet it rarely begins with confidence. It begins with discomfort. It begins with that subtle, persistent heaviness you feel whenever you try to meet standards that never belonged to you in the first place. You start to notice how much of your life has been shaped by what others believed you should be, how you should act, speak, dress, work, love, or sacrifice. You realize that somewhere along the way you internalized those expectations until they felt like obligations, and those obligations eventually turned into invisible chains. You followed them because you were taught that approval was the measure of goodness and compliance was the measure of worth. But a time comes when those expectations begin to suffocate the parts of you that are trying to grow, and that's when the shedding begins. It often starts with a quiet frustration that you can no longer ignore. You look at the life you've built and start to question whether it reflects who you truly are or merely who you were told to be. You begin noticing the roles you've played for so long that you almost forgot they were roles at all. Roles crafted to make others comfortable, roles designed to avoid conflict, roles built around fears of rejection or failure. These expectations cling to you like old coats you outgrew yet kept wearing, because the world around you insisted they still fit. The moment you recognize their weight, you begin loosening your grip on them, even if you don't yet have the courage to let them fall away completely. As you peel away these layers, you confront the uncomfortable truth that some expectations were passed down from people you love deeply. Family, culture, society, they shape your earliest beliefs about who you're allowed to be. You might hear echoes of their voices telling you to stay small, stay polite, stay predictable, stay within the boundaries they understand. Letting go of these expectations can feel like betrayal. You worry that becoming yourself means disappointing those who guided you, but then you realize that living for approval is its own kind of betrayal, the betrayal of your own soul, and slowly, gently you begin to choose honesty over compliance. This shedding requires courage because it invites uncertainty. When you release the identity others built for you, you stand at the threshold of who you truly are. There is no script to follow, no applause guaranteed, no map handed to you. You simply begin removing the masks you've worn for years. Some fall off easily, sliding away like dust from an old book. Others cling stubbornly because they were tied to your survival, people-pleasing, perfectionism, overgiving, avoidance. As you loosen each one, you begin feeling the unfamiliar sensation of freedom. You begin realizing how heavy life had become simply because you carried expectations meant for someone else's journey. The shedding also reveals how much energy you've spent trying to meet standards that did nothing to nurture you. You see how often you said yes when your soul meant no, how often you pursued goals that didn't ignite you, how often you kept peace at the cost of your own inner warfare. You start to understand that the life you've been living was not truly chosen, it was inherited. And there is something deeply empowering about recognizing that what you inherited does not have to be what you continue. As the layers fall away, you begin to reclaim parts of yourself you silenced to fit into the molds others created. Dreams you dismissed resurface. Desires you pushed aside whisper louder. Truths you buried rise to the surface with urgency. This is where clarity begins. With each expectation released, you see more clearly who you are without the roles, without the pressure, without the weight of being everything for everyone. You start making decisions based on your heart rather than your fear. You begin showing up as yourself rather than an edited version designed to please. At times, this shedding can feel lonely because not everyone will understand your transformation. Some preferred the version of you that met their needs. Some will resist your growth because your liberation exposes their comfort with your limitation. But even in those moments, you discover a deeper truth. You would rather be alone with your authenticity than surrounded by people who only love your compliance. And that realization strengthens you in ways you never imagined. Eventually, you reach a point where the expectations you carried for years no longer have a hold on you. You begin walking differently, speaking differently, choosing differently, not because you became someone new, but because you finally stopped pretending. And as the last of those old expectations fall away, you experience a profound sense of lightness. You realize that your life is finally becoming your own, shaped not by the world's demands but by your own truth calling you forward. The discovery of inner clarity arrives quietly, often after long stretches of confusion, noise, and emotional fog. It is not a sudden lightning strike but a gradual illumination, like morning light slipping between the branches of a forest that once felt too dense to navigate. Before clarity comes, you often feel lost inside your own life, pulled in different directions by responsibilities, desires, fears, and the opinions of others. You move through your days carrying the weight of unresolved questions, uncertain decisions, and a heart that keeps asking for something you haven't yet learned how to give. But the moment you choose yourself, something shifts within you, and that shift becomes the doorway to discovering what truly matters. Clarity begins with honesty. For the first time in years, you stop pretending you are fine with things that exhaust you. You stop saying yes when every part of you whispers no. You stop chasing goals that were handed to you instead of born from within you. When you choose yourself, you create the permission your soul has been waiting for, the permission to admit what you're tired of, what you've outgrown, what no longer fuels you, and what you were only holding on to out of habit. That honesty acts like a lantern you carry as you step deeper into your own interior world. As you examine your life without the filter of external validation, clarity becomes sharper. You begin recognizing which relationships nourish you and which ones drain you. You see the difference between commitments that align with your purpose and obligations that merely occupy your time. You begin paying attention to how your body reacts to certain environments, tightening around what feels wrong, relaxing before what feels right. You notice how often you ignored your intuition simply because you were afraid of disappointing someone. Now, with self-choice as your anchor, you finally begin listening to yourself with seriousness. This clarity also exposes the truth behind your struggles. You start understanding why certain patterns repeated in your life. You see how fear disguised itself as practicality. You see how your longing disguised itself as restlessness. You realize that many of your battles were not signs of weakness, but signals that you were living outside your authentic alignment. With this realization, you stop blaming yourself for the chaos you endured and begin seeing it as the journey that led you back to your own voice. As clarity expands, your priorities reorganize themselves naturally. The loudest demands no longer dictate your direction. The opinions of others no longer drown out your instincts. You begin valuing your peace more than approval, your growth more than comfort, your truth more than tradition. You start making decisions from a place of inner stability rather than urgency or fear. You trust yourself more, not because everything becomes easy, but because you finally recognize that your inner compass has been guiding you all along. You simply needed the courage to follow it. Inner clarity also brings a profound stillness. It is the peace that comes when you stop running from yourself. It is the calm that settles in your chest when you spend time alone and feel companionship rather than emptiness. You start appreciating the beauty of your own company. You realize that solitude is not loneliness, but the sacred space where your spirit speaks the loudest. In that space, everything becomes easier to understand: the relationships you should release, the dreams you should pursue, the boundaries you need to set, and the path that feels like home. This clarity transforms the way you relate to others as well. You no longer tolerate disrespect, manipulation, or inconsistency because you've learned how deeply such behaviors cloud your spirit. You no longer accept half-love, lukewarm friendship, or conditional support. You understand the value of reciprocity, truth, and commitment. You attract connections that mirror your growth because you no longer cling to those that mirror your fears. The more clarity you gain, the more your life begins to align. Choices become simpler. Desires become stronger. Doubts lose their power. You begin walking with intention rather than wandering. You understand that choosing yourself was not an act of rejection toward others, it was an act of remembrance toward your own soul. In time, inner clarity becomes your North Star. It guides you not by force but by recognition. You simply know what feels right, what resonates, what deserves your time, and what belongs to the past. This knowing becomes unshakable, and with it comes a new way of living, lighter, truer, and deeply rooted in who you are. And all of this begins the moment you choose yourself. The rise of emotional independence begins with a quiet but powerful realization. You can no longer live a life where your peace depends on someone else's choices, someone else's moods, someone else's ability to stay, understand, or validate you. It begins when you grow tired of tying your happiness to unpredictable hands, when you feel the exhaustion of giving your emotional world to people who were never equipped to carry it. Emotional independence is not about becoming cold or distant. It is about reclaiming the parts of yourself you scattered in your attempts to be loved, accepted, or understood. It is the moment you step away from seeking permission to be whole and instead give that permission to yourself. This transformation often starts with the painful recognition of how much you relied on others to feel complete. You begin to see how often you waited for someone else to choose you so you could finally feel worthy. How often you suppressed your needs because you feared losing someone's affection. How often you made yourself small so another person could feel big. Emotional dependence teaches you to build your identity around external anchors, relationships, approval, attention, promises. But those anchors shift, change, break, or drift. And each time they do, they pull a piece of you with them. When you choose yourself above all else, you begin to gather those pieces back, one by one, until you realize you are capable of being the foundation you have been seeking in others. As emotional independence grows, you stop expecting others to rescue you from your struggles. You understand that while support is beautiful, salvation must come from within. You stop waiting for apologies that may never arrive and closure that may never be given. Instead, you learn to give yourself the forgiveness, understanding, and compassion you once begged for. You realize that emotional maturity does not come from never being hurt. It comes from knowing how to rise after the hurt, how to soothe your own wounds without clinging to the ones who caused them. One of the most profound shifts in emotional independence is learning to sit with your own feelings rather than rushing to escape them. You begin to understand that emotions are not threats, they are guides. You no longer drown them in distractions, relationships, or approval seeking. Instead, you face them honestly. You learn to differentiate between loneliness and longing, between fear and intuition, between attachment and love. You begin realizing that many of your past emotional storms came from ignoring what your heart was trying to say. As you strengthen your emotional independence, you create space to listen deeply, to respond with truth rather than react with panic. This independence also changes the way you love others. You stop clinging, you stop begging for reassurance, you stop molding yourself into whatever shape keeps someone close, Instead, you love with open hands, not with a frantic grip. You become someone who gives freely without losing yourself, someone who receives love without fearing its loss. Your relationships become healthier because they are no longer built on desperation or dependency, but on mutual respect and emotional strength. You stop seeking people to complete you and start sharing life with people who complement you. Emotional independence also brings the courage to walk away when necessary. You no longer stay in situations that drain you simply because you fear being alone. You understand that solitude is not punishment, it is space for healing, reflection, and rediscovery. You stop allowing others to manipulate your emotions or guilt, trip you into silence. You no longer accept half presence or half effort. You demand honesty, consistency, and emotional integrity, not because you are demanding, but because you finally value yourself enough to require what you once tolerated without question. With emotional independence, you begin to cultivate an inner sanctuary. Your peace becomes less fragile. Your joy becomes less vulnerable. Your sense of identity becomes less tied to external circumstances. You learn how to calm yourself after disappointment, motivate yourself after setbacks, and comfort yourself after heartbreak. You realize that the strongest form of love is the love you give yourself, the kind that doesn't leave when things get difficult, the kind that doesn't fall apart when someone else does. Over time, you notice that life feels lighter. You no longer carry the burden of others' expectations or emotional states. You stop feeling responsible for fixing what was never yours to mend. You embrace the freedom of knowing that you can handle whatever comes because you trust your ability to anchor yourself. And this trust becomes unshakable. Emotional independence is not the absence of connection. It is the presence of self. It is the ability to stand firmly on your own ground even while holding someone's hand. It is the knowing that you are whole even when alone, and that your heart belongs to you before it belongs to anyone else. And when you finally reach this place, you understand that choosing yourself was never abandonment of others. It was the long-awaited reunion with your own strength. The unexpected peace that follows choosing yourself is not loud, dramatic, or intense. It is subtle, almost fragile at first, like a soft breeze that moves through your life quietly, touching everything without demanding attention. It arrives slowly, after the storms, after the heartbreaks, after the long nights of questioning your worth, and the long days of carrying everyone else's expectations on your shoulders. This peace comes the moment you stop betraying yourself for the sake of belonging, when you stop fighting battles that drain you, when you stop forcing yourself into spaces where your spirit cannot breathe. At first it might feel unfamiliar, almost suspicious, because you are so used to chaos that calmness seems foreign. But as it settles, you begin to understand that this peace is not an accident. It is the natural outcome of finally honoring your own soul. This peace begins when you learn to listen to yourself without dismissing your feelings. You start to realize how much of your inner unrest came from ignoring your own voice, silencing your needs, and accepting situations that your heart had been resisting for years. When you choose yourself, you stop abandoning your inner truth, and with that shift, the constant internal tension begins to dissolve. You no longer feel torn between what you want and what others expect. You no longer feel the need to constantly justify yourself or explain your decisions. Peace begins to grow in the space that was once occupied by self-doubt and self-neglect. As this peace expands, it touches your relationships. You find that you no longer crave validation or approval with the same desperation. You can hear criticism without collapsing. You can receive affection without fearing its loss. You can set boundaries without guilt. When you are no longer emotionally entangled in the reactions of others, you start experiencing relationships in a healthier, calmer way. You don't cling, you don't beg, you don't chase. And in this newfound emotional balance, you discover an ease that you didn't know you were capable of feeling. You begin to understand that peace doesn't come from controlling others or trying to predict their behaviors. It comes from controlling what you allow into your world, and what you choose to walk away from. There is also peace in letting go of who you were, letting go of the versions of yourself that were shaped by fear, guilt, and obligation, letting go of people who were tied to your past pain rather than your future growth, letting go of responsibilities that were never yours, letting go of ideals that were unrealistic. When you choose yourself, you stop gripping onto things that only kept you stuck, and with every release, your life becomes lighter. You realize how exhausting it was to carry what was not meant for you. You begin to breathe more deeply, think more clearly, and move more freely because you are no longer weighed down by emotional burdens that once felt permanent. This peace touches your mind as well. Thoughts that used to spiral endlessly begin to quiet. Worries that once consumed you lose their power. You no longer replay conversations in your head searching for mistakes. You no longer torture yourself with guilt over choosing your happiness. You start trusting your decisions. You start believing that you deserve a life that feels good, not just one that looks acceptable to others. This mental peace becomes a gentle clarity, a sense that you are finally aligned with yourself instead of fighting against your own instincts. The most surprising aspect of this peace is how steady it becomes over time. It is not a temporary feeling that fades with circumstances. It becomes your foundation. Even when challenges arise, even when life throws the unexpected your way, you don't crumble the way you once did. You face hardships with a calmness rooted in self-trust. You navigate change without fearing you will lose yourself in the process. You stop reacting from desperation and start responding with intention. This stability is something you could never build in a life where you constantly betrayed your own needs. Eventually, the peace that follows choosing yourself becomes your compass. You start recognizing instantly what disrupts your spirit and what nourishes it. You start saying no with conviction and yes with clarity. You start recognizing that peace is not the absence of problems but the presence of alignment. You feel grounded, anchored, steady, not because everything around you is perfect, but because everything within you is finally in harmony. This peace is the quiet reward for every boundary you set, every truth you spoke, every moment you walked away from what dimmed your spirit, and every time you decided that you deserved to be the main character in your own life. It is the peace of finally coming home to yourself. When you finally choose yourself above all else, life does not transform overnight, nor does the path suddenly become easy. But something far more meaningful happens. You begin to live honestly. You begin to exist in alignment with the quiet truths hidden beneath your ribs. You shed the weight of expectations that never belonged to you, reclaim the worth you once handed away too freely, and rise into emotional strength that no longer trembles at the thought of standing alone. You learn to trust your own voice, follow your own compass, and honor your own heart. And in doing so, you discover a peace that does not shout but stays. A peace that holds you steady through change, choices, and reconstruction. This journey back to yourself becomes the most important step you ever take, not because the world changes, but because you finally stop abandoning the person you were always meant to be. So as you walk forward, may courage accompany every step, may clarity illuminate every decision, and may your own truth guide you into a life that feels entirely yours. Choosing yourself is not a departure. It is a homecoming. A quiet, powerful return to the essence you lost along the way. Good luck on your journey of becoming, of rising, of choosing your own soul with confidence and grace. And thank you for allowing me to walk with you through these words and this transformation.